Yeah, this is happening now. The Goose from the overnight hit, Untitled Goose game. It's a game with a very simple premise. Be a goose, which for those of you who don't know, are jerks. Seriously, geese are some of the meanest birds to waddle on this big blue earth, and that's very much emphasized in this video game. You go around a small town and pretty much turn the goose into a general nuisance to its populace, stealing their stuff, breaking their stuff, causing mischief, you know, things that these little demons do in real life. And when coming to Super Smash Bros., it'll act no different. Everyone will hate it, fighters and players alike. So getting right into things, the average goose weighs about the same as your average Pikachu, so as such, it'll be a rather floaty, lightweight character. And being a bird, one that flies south for the winter, it'll have a lot of jumps, 6 in total to be specific, and it will have the ability to crawl. Though its crawling will just look like how it does when it walks around with its head low to the ground. The goose when coming to Super Smash Bros. Would be what I call another Animal Crossing case, where it's not necessarily fighting per se, but instead its actions are themed in a way so that in reality they may not actually be that big a deal, but for Smash, they still cause damage. There will be a couple of exceptions, like its jab, which is just a simple spammable one-hit jab that has the goose peck forwards. You know, a thing that geese in real life do with those evil serrated teeth of theirs. Its dash attack will be another move that's more based on what real geese do when they're being aggressive, and that's charge forwards with their wings out to make themselves look bigger and their beaks open. This will be a dash attack with a sweet spot, as if the foe gets hit by the goose's beak, they'll take small flinching damage as they get dragged along, and then it'll be launched with the last hit at the end of the move. If the foe gets hit by any other part of the goose's body, however, they'll just get comedically popped into the air. Now getting into the goose's tilt attacks, these are where things are going to start pulling much more from its game. And by pulling, I mean that it jacked everyone's possessions. For its side tilt, it'll pull out the woman's fancy vase and swing it forwards vertically from high to low. Now the unique thing about this attack that it'll be sharing with a few other moves is that if the swing from the vase doesn't hit a foe, and only if it doesn't hit a foe, then the goose will then throw the vase at the apex of its swing, turning it into a gravity-affected projectile. As a projectile, it deals less damage than it normally does when the goose is swinging it, but it does travel a fair distance before shattering on impact. I chose to have it throw the fancy vase specifically as a reference to how the gentleman throws it if the vase ends up in his yard. For the up tilt, this will have the glass bottle get stuck on the goose's beak, and it'll swing its neck overhead from front to back to get it off. Just like with the side tilt, if the swing doesn't hit a foe, then the bottle will then fly off as a gravity-affected projectile, except it'll be thrown at a kind of backwards angle. The down tilt can have the goose swing the bar of soap horizontally low to the ground, and just like with the other tilts, if the swing misses, it'll then throw the soap as a projectile. Except in this case, the soap won't be flying through the air, but instead will slide across the ground a fair distance. It will stop at ledges, however. This bubbly down tilt does also have its own unique property, as if the soap connects with a foe at all, whether swung or tossed, it'll make the foe sudsy, and as a result, will cause them a loss of traction and make their movements slippery for 3 seconds. Now for the goose's side smash, this will cause the farmer's no geese sign to appear in front of the goose. This will prompt the goose to honk, causing the sign to fall over. And that's the attack. Being that it's a disjointed attack, this should allow it to be used to clang with most things without much danger to the goose. The up smash will also include the no geese sign, except this one will rise up to deal damage to foes above the goose, so it's kinda like Isabelle's up smash in a sense. The down smash will have 2 smaller no geese sign appear on both sides of the goose, and after it honks, they'll both fall over, damaging any foe in their way. For its neutral aerial, this can be another aggressive goose thing. It'll just viciously flap its wings as fast as it can on both sides of itself, dealing damage and knocking away anyone hit by its wings. Now for its forward, back, and up aerials, these can all be like its tilt attacks, having the goose swing an item, and if the attack misses, then the item is thrown, turning into a gravity-affected projectile. What item thrown can be completely random. They don't affect the properties of the move at all, just their aesthetical appearance, and the items can all be various things that the goose steals or interacts with during the course of its game. The forward air would have the goose pull an item out and swing it forwards vertically from high to low, and if thrown, the item flies at a slightly downwards angle forwards. The back air can have the goose swing the random item horizontally behind itself, and if thrown, travel straight before it begins to fall. And the up air can have the goose almost whip the item it's holding straight upwards, using its neck to give it some extra lash. If thrown, the item flies straight upwards before gravity steps in. I should also mention that the items thrown by these aerials will always remain on screen until they make contact with something or go into the blast zone. And for the down air, this can also involve an item, but instead of just a random item that's used to attack and then thrown, it can just be a single bucket that the goose simply drops. It behaves like it bumped into it, and the bucket will just fall straight down as a projectile, hurting any foe in its way. But this bucket will have a unique property to it, as if you can hit a foe standing on the ground with it from directly above while the bucket is at a certain angle, specifically upside down, it'll land on their head and get stuck. It'll remain stuck for 3 seconds, and while it is, the player's horizontal movement controls become reversed, as they can't exactly see where they're going. It's funny to do, but it does require precise aim, as the bucket spins as it falls and always starts right side up, so you do need proper spacing and timing in order to be able to make this happen. The goose's grabs will admittedly be the least interesting thing about this moveset. They also won't be very strong overall. It'll grab with its beak and pummel by biting down hard with those demonic serrated teeth. The forward throw can have the goose peck at the foe a few times before they get launched forwards. The back throw can be a simple jumping toss backwards. The up throw can have the goose honk at the foe, causing them to jump in fear, which will send them upwards. And the down throw can reference another real life thing that geese do when attacking people: fly in their face while viciously pecking and kicking at them. This will rack up damage before slightly launching the foe away forwards. If you hated the goose already, you best prepare yourself, because you're really going to hate it after this. For the goose's neutral special, it'll do one of the most abused attacks among its arsenal. Terrifying. Every time you use neutral special, the goose will honk. And just like in the Untitled Goose game, there's no cooldown to this, so you can just button mash the button for all I care to make the goose just keep honking. Aside from grating on the other player's nerves, honk will only affect other fighters if they're near the goose, about this far away to give an example. And if a fighter is within earshot, they'll suffer a random effect. And 80% of the time, if they are within earshot, nothing will happen. The goose just honks and it doesn't do anything. 15% of the time, however, this will cause a quick control reversal for the foe within earshot, as if they were startled and were trying to get away from the goose. 4% of the time, it'll cause the foe to trip, as if it caught them off guard and made them lose their balance. And finally, with only a 1% chance of happening, it can make the foe dizzy for a short bit. Those all may seem like ridiculously small chances and not even worth trying to do, especially since most of the time nothing even happens, but remember, you can spam it with very little consequence to the goose at all. You can even move around while honking if you started honking first. Just keep honking and something will come out of it soon. You know, aside from the fact that your friends will hate you for doing so. Now for the goose's side special, this will have it do a simple attack that I'm going to call peck theft. In the Untitled Goose game, if you see someone holding onto a particular item that you would very much like to have for yourself, that you would like to relieve them of, you very much can do so. And how do you do so? By simply snatching it out of their hands. That mechanic is what this attack will be based on. It'll have the goose do a quick peck forwards, and one of two things will happen if a foe is hit by this peck. Firstly, if the foe is holding an item, then, as you can imagine, the goose will steal it, taking it from the foe and will be holding said item to do with whatever it pleases. Now, believe it or not, that's actually the best case scenario, since if you're not holding any item when hit by the peck theft, it's still gonna steal something from you anyway. Geese are pretty stubborn birds after all. But BJ, you may be saying, if you're not holding an item, how could the goose possibly steal from you? You don't have anything. Well, I'm glad you asked, my metaphorical friend, but there is in fact something that every single character in Super Smash Bros. Has. And that would be the very attacks that make up their moveset. You heard me correctly. If the goose hits you with its side special and you're not holding an item, then it will steal one of your character's attacks right out of their moveset. And I'm not talking about what Kirby does, where he simply copies the neutral special to use for himself. The goose outright steals a random attack right out of the victim's moveset, making the target straight up unable to use whatever attack was nicked. The goose can't use the attack for itself. Instead, what happens is that if the goose successfully steals an attack, that move is then transformed into a colored orb that the goose will then be holding as an item. As I said, what attack that gets stolen is completely random, and the color of the orb created by it will signify what kind of attack it is. If the orb is green, that means it was a basic attack that was stolen from you. If it's red, that signifies that you lost a special attack, and if the orb is gray, then you lost access to one of your throws. Aside from the color of the orb giving you a hint of which attack is now missing, you won't actually know what attack specifically was stolen until you find yourself using a certain button command, only to see the attack just not happening. This is a move that I know a lot of people would absolutely dread, especially if certain important moves get taken away, like your up special. However, there are quite a few limitations to the peck theft to keep in mind. For starters, only one attack can be stolen per opponent at a time, so if the Goose tries using peck theft again on a foe that already had an attack stolen, then it'll only deal damage or steal an item assuming the foe is holding one. That aspect will always work so long as the Goose wasn't already holding an item. And as I'm sure you can guess, when an attack is stolen, it's not gone permanently, as all the foe has to do to retrieve their lost attack is to get that orb. They don't even need to pick it up. All they need to do is get close enough to it while it's not being held by another player, and it'll automatically be absorbed into them, thus gaining their lost move back. And this orb overall is useless to use as an offensive weapon against the foe it was stolen from, because if you try throwing it at them, it'll just be absorbed without so much as leaving a mark of damage. It can be used to hurt other foes, however, being treated like any other item that you can pick up and throw. Speaking of which, don't think you can just take the orb and throw it off the stage. If you do that, the moment it hits the blast zone, then the lost move will just automatically return to the foe that it was taken from. What you want to do with these orbs as the Goose is play a game of keep away, something I'm sure would get on any opponent's nerves real quick. And if a foe with a stolen orb ever suffers a loss of a stock, then the orb currently on screen will just disappear and the foe will have their lost move restored upon respawning. Anyways, moving on to the up special, this will actually not be a recovery move. It'll be a similar case to Jigglypuff, as since the Goose will have a lot of jumps, it wouldn't really need to have a special attack to help with recovery. In fact, also just like Jigglypuff, the Goose's up special will be one that's based around sound. It'll have the Goose pull out one of its favorite golden bells and ring it. It rings it a few times, and each ring creates a sound wave that'll do two things. The first thing is that it neutralizes all projectiles. If they were non-interactable items, then it will just make them disappear. If they are interactable, then it will do the second thing. And that second thing is that any item within the sound waves will actually be pulled towards the Goose. So even though I compared it to that of Jigglypuff's up special, it's really more similar to that of Rosalina's down special. Unlike Rosalina's, however, when the Goose pulls items towards itself with the bell ringing, said items won't automatically be given to it. And finally, for the Goose's down special, this is where things are going to get a lot more slapsticky, as well as add a lot more versatility to its other attacks to wrap it all up in one little pretty red bow. Using it will cause one of a select few of the town citizens from the Untitled Goose game to appear to make things a lot more interesting. Only one citizen can appear from the Goose at a time. Which one appears is completely random. They all have differing behaviors, and they'll only stick around for at most 8 seconds at a time. But once they leave, a new one can be spawned by the Goose immediately. That is unless the citizen is attacked by an opponent. If that happens, they'll kinda just comedically fall over, then disappear. And then the Goose will have to wait for 5 seconds before they can bring another citizen in. The main function of the citizens is pretty much to interrupt the fight and annoy the players in some capacity, as getting too close to any of them will cause the players to be pushed away, including the Goose itself. Much like what happens to the Goose if it gets too close to any of them in their game. They do also act as solid obstructions, so they can't be passed through and can stop projectiles if they get hit by any that don't pierce. Each of the citizens can also be affected in similar ways by the Goose's various moves to mix things up a bit. For starters, using certain basic attacks from the Goose on the citizens will cause them to react in various ways. Like if you use the down tilt to throw the soap at them, it'll cause the citizen to slip and fall, which can hurt foes if they're in the way of them falling. Or you can drop the bucket on their head to make them a little more erratic, and even fall over, which can also hurt foes. Throwing items in general, whether that's from one of the Goose's attacks, or just an item being thrown by anyone, will get the citizens' attention as well when it makes noise, and this can change their behavior in various ways too. But overall, the two attacks that will affect the citizens the most will be the goose's honk and its bell ring. Honking can make them do totally new things, and ringing the bell will make the citizens begin to chase after the goose, just like in the game when all the people tried to get the stolen bell back from the goose. Now that's pretty much all the commonalities of the citizens. As for who they are, there can be 5 of them. To appropriately start things off, first there's the farmer. When he appears, he just walks around normally on the stage or platform that he appears on, walking left and right. If anyone gets too close to him, he'll begin to do the funny little jog to chase whoever's in his sight. And if the goose ever honks, this will make him stop for a second and then turn around. The next citizen is the shopkeeper, who behaves in a very similar way to the farmer, except she's walking around with her broom. She'll attempt to shoo away players with that broom, so it'll have a bit more range to be able to mess with their controls, and if the foe actually gets hit by the broom, they'll take a small amount of damage. If the goose honks while she's out, it'll make the shopkeeper always head towards the direction of the goose. And here's a funny thing, if you use the side special peck theft on the shopkeeper from the front, she and the goose will begin to wrestle for the broom, until eventually the broom breaks, and the momentum of the pole will cause the shopkeeper to swing the handle of the now broken broom back, which can deal damage to foes if they happen to be behind the shopkeeper during the commotion. After which the shopkeeper will just disappear, but the goose will still keep the broom head it just took to be used as a basic item to throw at people. The next citizen can be the timid boy with glasses. He runs away from any player who gets too close to him, and on occasion he'll trip over his shoelaces and fall over, which can deal some damage to foes in his way. If the goose honks, this will make the boy do a small panicked jump and then run into the other direction, and he'll be more likely to trip if this happens. The small panicked jump can also deal some damage to foes if they happen to be too close when the boy jumps. Next is the old man with the harmonica. He's the only citizen that normally doesn't really move around. He just sits on his stool and plays his harmonica. The goose honking, however, will make him decide to get up and then begin to play a good old game of muckers. He throws some rings forwards at a stick, and these rings act as projectiles to deal minimal flinching damage to foes. If at any point the old man is attacked, first, you should feel bad, why would you do that, you monster? And second, this will cause him to fall backwards away from the direction that he was attacked from. Him falling backwards will deal damage to any foe in his way. The only time the old man will ever get up and move from his spot is if he hears the bell from the goose's up special. You can also use peck theft on him to steal his harmonica to use as another throwing item. But why would you do that? I bet there's a history behind that harmonica. He probably got it as a final birthday present from his dear wife, whom he was married to for 75 years while she lay on her deathbed, with her final words to him being, "So long as you play the harmonica, I will always be with you," she say with her final breath before her eyes slowly close with a gentle smile on her face. Why? Why would you take his harmonica, you absolute scum of the earth? Oh wait, that's right. You're a goose. Anyways, for the final citizen to appear, it can be the burly man who works as a bouncer for the local pub. He's effectively a better version of the farmer. He'll actually deal a little bit of damage if he pushes foes away, he's a bit harder to knock over, and if the goose honks, he always goes straight towards it. But be careful doing that, as this is the only citizen that actually can deal damage to the goose. That said, however, if you happen to drop a bucket on his head using the down air, when he falls over, it deals a lot of damage to any foe who happens to be in his way of falling, and they will be buried by the burly man if he accidentally sits on them as well. And if that happens, well then needless to say, you're probably going to be looking like those tomatoes right there. And that just about does it. Overall, the goose's moveset would be one that would be extremely annoying to deal with. Obstructions, things getting stolen, things making your life just so much harder in general. I know a lot of people would hate having to fight a character like this, and anyone who chooses to main them would probably lose all their friends within the hour. But unfortunately, that's the point. After all, this is the goose we're talking about. The whole point of its game is to be a public nuisance, so as such, making a Smash moveset anything otherwise would be a complete disservice, even if we would all hate it. But you know what? It works out. Because deep down, we all already hate the goose anyways. The goose would have a cinematic final smash that starts with it charging forwards, and anybody hit by it will be pulled in. It then plays out showing the very town where the Untitled Goose game takes place, and all of the foes just sitting there. Except they'd all be trapped in their trophy forms. And wait a second. This isn't the town at all. It's the miniature model town. And the trophified foes are sitting next to the model church. And it's the goose. It's a giant goose. And he what's he doing? He's tearing at the model church. Debris falls as it lands on the foes, dealing big damage to them. The cinematic concludes with the whole model church coming down on top of the foes, and the goose just waddling away with its new shiny bell in tow. And afterwards, the foes are just launched away when the cinematic ends. It's not often when I feel the need to use outside sources when coming up with alternate colors, but with this just being a normal goose, it feels only appropriate to make its alts based off of other breeds of geese. Its default color is of course its pure white design, which appears to be based off of a snow goose. Its first alt can still be as a snow goose, but now it's wearing the red bow, accidentally put onto it by the messy woman who paints in her backyard. And getting into the other color breeds, the first can be the design of a cackling goose, and it can be wearing an orange bow. Next is a Canadian goose, one wearing a yellow bow. Then the ashy-headed goose, and it can have a green bow. Then a bean goose, donning a teal-colored bow. Then a Cape Barren goose, sporting a bow that's pink in color. And finally there's the ruddy-headed goose, and it can have on a blue bow. Its stage intro can simply have it fly onto the stage. I guess it was flying south for the winter and took a wrong turn somewhere. For its taunts, they'd all be a variation of the same thing. It'll simply hold out its wings. And that's it. And this can be a taunt that you can keep doing so long as you hold the taunt button down. You can even walk around and fight while doing this. Gotta assert your dominance after all. The first taunt can have it simply hold its wings in place, the second one can have it slowly flap its wings, and the final can have it flap its wings really fast. And finally, for the victory animations, the first can show the goose just walk up while wearing its crown, and then just do a single. The next can show the worker from the pub walking up with a box, until suddenly the goose just jumps out, startling the worker and making her fall over. The goose just stands there afterwards looking at the lady as she catches her breath. And the final can show the goose walking up to a large hole filled with bells as it holds one in its beak. It then drops that bell down the hole and starts admiring them, referencing the end of its game. And this could be a victory animation that's guaranteed to play if you won the match using the goose's final smash. And that does it for What If the Untitled Goose was in Smash. Really guys, if there's anything I have to say about the goose, it's this. Anyways, if you liked what you saw and would like to see even more characters be given possible Smash movesets, be sure to subscribe. And if you'd like to support the show and help me be able to make more content for you guys while you also get some perks for doing so, you can click the join button either below the video or on my main page to become a sponsor for my channel. I'd really appreciate anything that can be contributed. And of course, if you have a character that you'd like to see be given a possible Smash moveset, leave a comment down below or contact me on Twitter at BrawlFan1 on Twit. I hope you all enjoyed and thank you so much for watching!